Welcome to the show, Jessica. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I wanted to have you here because I was reading about you and you're a public health educator, which sounds pretty broad. So we're going to narrow it down here right at the beginning of our conversation. But ultimately, you help people with burnout and stress management. And you came to that pretty honestly from your own experiences.
Yes, no, 100%. So Masters of Public Health, I just tell people, you all know it. If you've seen a commercial for diabetes, you see a commercial for breast cancer, those are all public health issues. And like you said, my issue came from my own personal experience. So my story is I started my career in the drug and alcohol field. So I was working with men reducing their sentence from jail, coming into the rehab. Um, I saw both my clients and my coworkers were experiencing this thing called stress and burnt out. And I said, oh, well, I should try to do some research on this. So I started to went to our school, got my master's in public health. And that's when I experienced my own burnt out. Um, I was on my way home. I was leaving my practical internship for my master's, going to my night job, and fell asleep at the wheel, got in a car accident.
Wow.
And yeah, and I went to the doctor's and he's like, tell me what's everything's going on. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just so tired, but I have things to do. I keep getting sick. My knee is really swollen. It's not fitting in my pants. So after getting tested for a disease, Lyme disease, diabetes, I mean, you name it, I got tested for it. MRIs, everything in between. We went back to my doctor, and my doctor was like, let's start from the beginning. He said, tell me about your everyday. I said, okay. I go to school full time. I work full time. I have two part-time jobs. I volunteer on the weekends. I have a relationship. And I started naming everything. He goes, that's what happened. You burnt yourself out. I said, no, no, no. I'm 24. You don't burn yourself at 24. I don't have kids. I'm not running a business. What do you mean? I work out. I eat healthy. And so that was my real reality check of we all can burn out. And this is just as important because at 24, if I'm burning myself out, a mom can, a CEO can. And it didn't matter the color of my skin. It didn't matter my gender. It didn't matter what I was doing. We burn ourselves out.
Well, that's an interesting, well, your story is relatable to so many people. And what's interesting about it is you had a really good primary care physician who was helping you get to the bottom of it. And some doctors might not do that, or some patients might not know to, go back in and say, this is what's happening. It's not any better. Because I'd imagine a lot of people show up to a doctor's office with these symptoms and are dismissed or given a medication, but not really told, or even do they recognize or take that deeper dive to find out that this is the actual problem.
Oh, for sure. People that I work with, conversations, books I read, all the things, like it's very common for someone to say, oh, you always get migraines. Okay, well, just here's a new migraine medicine. Here's another new migraine medicine. Or I can't sleep at night. And these are all surface level things. And to you and I are like, yeah, I get migraines. Yeah, there's some days I struggle with sleeping. And so, yes, you can have those issues. But when they are lagging on for weeks and months at a time, we have to have a different discussion. And that's a lot of
For
sticking,
causing you to have a car accident and fall asleep at the wheel. That's a big
right?
wake
Like
up call.
it's a big wake up call, and we shouldn't have to have those big wake up calls to speak up for ourselves.
Well, and we shouldn't, but if we do, what I have found in life is the wake up call gets louder and louder. You might have had little ones along the way that you were ignoring, and then now this big one comes, and then that's called the wake up call. But the tap was there for a long time. What would be an example in your own experience that might have been the tap on the door until the big wake up call came?
Oh yeah, I mean the being tired a lot, and not just being tired to the point where again I couldn't keep my eyes open. I driving home, I stopped for coffee, I kept the windows open, things like that. Like that all those taps should have been a thing where I'm sitting and having a conversation and I'm dozing off, right? So those should have been some wake up calls. I was getting sick a lot. I was having flu-like symptoms. I was having mono-like symptoms, but I wasn't. I didn't have mono. I didn't have the flu,
So you
but
were
I was.
run down and just picking up everything people were throwing around.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when we talk about stress and what it can do, even in a healthy body, I was 24 years old when I had cancer, and I can't entirely blame stress on cancer, but that was one of the hardest years of my life. I've had some pretty hard years since then. And that's why it's so important to me to try to manage my stress and not take so much of it in. And because it was one of the worst years of my life. My husband lost his father, and my dad and his dad had been best friends my whole life. I had actually probably spent more time with my father-in-law than my husband had, because I lived down the street and he lived states away because he lived with his mom and I lived near his dad. And that's a whole geography story, but there was no room for me to grieve because it was my husband's loss, not mine, at least in our marriage at that time.
Yeah.
And he wasn't dealing with it very healthily at all. So I think that a combination with whatever was happening in my body physically made it possible for this, mutation to happen and rapidly happen. And I pay attention to that now when something stressful happens in my life. I really try to still mentally take care of myself. And when you work with people who come to you with stress factors, well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to know kind of how you go about digging into that, just as that doctor did, to try to say, okay, these are the triggers, these are the warnings. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more deeply about it, and just hopefully people who are watching will get that little tap and start to think about making those minor little tweaks that help make big changes. We'll be back in just a moment. We're here with Jessica Hallahan. Thanks for being here. We're talking with you. You are a public health educator who focuses a lot on stress management. You were telling us your own story about falling asleep at the wheel. Your doctor, a good one sounds like, was helping you get to the bottom of these symptoms of sleep deprivation or feeling tired, getting sick often. Your immune system was compromised, and it was really due to stress. And so now you could have just said, okay, I need to manage the stress in my life, but instead you went to college and got a degree so that you could officially and professionally help people with the same type of thing. So when you started out and you got your education in this field, what were you hoping to accomplish with others, and how closely do you feel you're able to achieve that work through not only your own experience, but through the education you received?
Yeah, when I first started my business, I was very much like, oh, I'm gonna be this woman speaker. I'm gonna educate women about self-love and that self-talk and things like that. Fast forward 5 years, what I do now is I typically work a lot in the blue collar space, so construction HVACs, and I do a lot of group work. When we find other people that are going through a lot of what we're going through and have an understanding of what we're going through, you have different conversations, different understandings, and a lot of, oh, me too moments. So a lot of what I focus on when I'm working in these groups and things like that is a lot about communication. So you talked about giving yourself that moment of grief and just that clarity moment of giving my brain some time to relax and, process everything that's going on up there. So I talk a lot about how do I talk to myself? How do I talk to others? And then a lot about time management. So talking a lot about boundaries, whether, making time for myself, actually sitting down and having lunch. And what does that actually do for our health and our mental health?
Well, when you talk about like when we're talking about the strategies for stress management and things and how you go about reducing the stress, and specifically about boundaries, when I think the older we get, the better we are at it. Maybe it's just because we're just so sick and tired of saying yes to people and to things we don't want to say yes to anymore. But how do you go about that even beginning to help someone who is a yes person at their own sacrifice to start to say no, and to not even have to give an explanation? You don't have to.
Cool.
I was telling someone something the other day in a message. Oh, I had registered for my yoga class and then I just couldn't go. And I started to give her this big explanation. I'm like, I just said, I won't be there. I'll see you Monday. And she's like, okay, great. And I'm like, I don't need to explain to the yoga instructor why I'm not going to be there. She probably doesn't care. Right. But this wanting to explain ourselves and wanting to make everybody feel good, which is important, but not at our own
Yes.
expense, where we're taking 10 minutes to send a text that would just be a quick, can't be there, Or
Yes.
no,
No, I think
no, I'm staying home tonight. These invites we get, and I love an invite because I'm a social person. But there are some people who, I have a friend who limits to social events a week,
yeah.
period, in story, and doesn't do anything on Sundays.
I love your friend. Um, well, I think there's two parts to this. One, I start a lot of times when there's that yes person, a lot of times they get frustrated that other people don't do things for themselves, for them, right? So, for example, oh, why did my husband just do this? Or why did my coworker just do that for me? And it's very much, well, what boundaries did you set? What standards did you set? So I kind of paint that picture first. And I think the other piece that comes with it is, well, what do I even want? Right. So when I say, like, what do you want? What do you need? And if I can't explain that to somebody, then I need to start making time for myself. So there's a kind of like a twofold that reasons to kind of get to somebody about that and make it make sense of, we don't have to say yes to everything. Because what standards am I setting? And then also, why is it important for me to sit with myself? It's important for me to sit with myself because I need to learn about my needs and wants. Because if I'm making everybody else happy, we've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty teapot. You have to
Yeah.
put your mask on first. Like, we've heard all of them. Well, that's what happens. You're literally depleting yourself. You're draining yourself. And you're like, why am I so tired? Why am I getting sick? I don't know. Because I'm giving my whole energy and life for everybody else, but you're allowed to be happy too.
Yeah. I think that sometimes too, I pay attention to the dialogue, and I'm not always great at it, but the whole adulting is hard, or being a mom is hard. I think when we say that to ourselves, being an entrepreneur is hard. So many of these things, yep, some of them are hard at different times, but I think the more we talk to ourselves about something being hard, the harder it feels. And so, you don't necessarily have to get up and give yourselves positive affirmations every single day, and some people do, and maybe that works. But for me, I just, it's kind of like, when you have kids and they say, oh, the terrible twos. I just didn't buy into it. And guess what? My kid wasn't terrible at two. I just wasn't going to allow that to be a thing because some saying has been going on for generations that they're terrible at two. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think I call this, listen, and, affirmation, meditation, all that stuff is amazing. So I don't want to
For
like poo
sure.
on it.
100%.
But I think there's a part where it's understanding why we do it, right? So
Mhm.
why do I sit up every morning and look in the mirror and say, I am grateful, I am a great mom, I'm a great business owner, right? Because if I start to tell myself that, eventually when that time comes, that I'm going to believe it, right?
Mhm.
So if I'm in a stressful moment, if I'm about to get my yearly review, great at my job, I'm successful at accounting, I'm like, I can start to talk myself out of those moments, right? So that's where the affirmation piece comes in. What I also tell people is kind of get curious. If you're saying, being an entrepreneur is hard. If you're saying being a mom is hard, and yes, there are hard moments for
Mhm.
sure. That's like stress is always going to
Mhm.
happen. That's definitely a thing. There's going to always be hard moments. So if I'm saying like today's really hard, okay, let's get curious. Why is today hard? What about this situation is making me frustrated? What about this situation is making me upset? What about that comment, right? So I say get the curious part in, like, ask yourself these questions, which is why it's so important for us to make time for ourselves. Because if I am yelling at my kids, if I'm telling my dog, stop barking, just go somewhere, everyone just go somewhere, which is fine, we have those moments and I don't want to discredit them. Let's check in. Do I not feel supported? Did I need help with dinner today? Do I feel overwhelmed with the chores? Is, stuff at work really bothering me? Whatever the case may be. Or maybe I don't feel respected, or maybe I don't feel seen today. I need to have those conversations. So if I need that support, I need to communicate that.
Yes, let's talk about that. We're going to take a break. We'll talk about communication. And one of the things that I was just thinking about when you said that, and I don't know why I keep my examples are about motherhood, but I was in an airport once and there was a little boy having a complete meltdown. And airports, we see that, right? I mean, it's stressful for parents, for kids, for everybody. And I think kids are expected to behave differently in an airport than they would in anywhere else when they don't know that. So
Yes.
this little boy, I think he was probably 3 years old or so, 4 years old, who was having a complete meltdown. And his mom just stopped in the middle of the airport, in the middle, everyone's walking by, including myself, and just sat on the floor with him and hugged him and just sat there for a minute. And I started to walk by her and I went back and I said, you're a really good mom. And she said, I am. I am. Like first she was questioning, and then she said, I am. And
Yeah.
I hope, in everyday life, she's a good mom. But looking at that behavior, that was good mothering. Just take a minute. Everybody just take a minute, the two of
Yes.
them. And I think too, when we talk about communication, we'll take a break and come back to it. But we need to surround ourselves with people who will tell us we're doing a good job, like who will recognize the effort we're making. Like we don't need cheerleaders all the time, but I'm a complete stranger in an airport telling this woman, nice work. And I saw it light up her face. And I think we can tell strangers when we recognize something that they're doing well. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with you. Jessica, we've been talking about stress management and how we can recognize stress in ourselves and what, you said, get curious, check in with yourself, what's happening that's making you react in a way that you feel maybe you could do better. Let's talk about the communication piece. So you're checking in, you're getting curious about your behavior or your response to something in a stressful situation, whatever that is, kids, work, whatever. And now communicating that, because you made a comment in the second segment about, are you not getting help? Or, there's nobody pitching in for the dishes, whatever it is. So now okay, I'm ticked off because I made this dinner and I did all the work, and then it's time to clean up and everyone just scatters to their places or whatever they're doing in the house. And so a tip for what you do in that situation, as opposed to nobody ever helps me and da 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 da. And I mean, that might work too. But what is the tips you have about communication in situations that need a little help?
Yeah, it's a big one, right? Because asking for help is big, and we do a lot of like, well, they should just already do it, and why don't they just help out? And there's all these things. So when I'm finished dinner and we made this amazing dinner, and like you said, people start to scatter, and I turn around and I look at the kitchen, I'm going, oh my gosh, I just want to sit. I can't do anymore. We all know what that feeling is, especially right now with the daylight savings. We're like, we just want to sit. My brain is fried. It's very much, it's being very specific. We have to, like, it's not just, I need help around the house, right? Like, that's not going to get us anywhere. What is it that I need? Hey, 15-year-old son, can you help? I need you to unload the dishwasher. 10-year-old daughter, can you clear, I need you to help clean off the dining room table. Husband, you need to take out the trash. Or it's not like, I'm not screaming. I'm just having conversations, and we're just having conversations and being very specific. Hey, on Tuesday nights, I work late. I just need a little help. Can you, Susie, have your homework all set up so I can check when I get home? Johnny, I need you, right? So it's just having very specific conversations. This is the biggest piece though. So by definition, stress is a reaction to change. So if this is not the normal routine and you're just like, okay, great, I'm going to tell Susie tonight to have everything done. She might do it tonight, right? But we're creating a habit. So she might not do it tomorrow. So stress is a reaction to change. So she's going to have a reaction and she's going to, so kind of like you said with that mom in the airport, just meet her where she's at. This is where I'm going to get curious. If she's like, oh, I don't know, mom, I can't have it by 5 o'clock. Okay, what makes you not have it ready by 5? Well, I don't know. By the time I get my shoes off and whatever, she's giving all the reasons. Okay, so how can we have you ready by 5? Start getting these curious conversations so we can see where each other are. Kind of like, again, going back to that mom at the airport. It's overwhelming. If you ever go to the airport, like it can be very overwhelming. So a child, when people are rushing and bustling and they're having, it can be very overwhelming. He thought, I feel overwhelmed. All right, let me hold you. Let's do a minute. Let me just hold you. Right. So it's, if I understand where they're coming from, I'm not having the racing brain thought of assuming, and we all know what happens when we assume, right? So I'm not doing assuming. So
Yeah.
just having that back and forth curious conversation is really important.
Yeah. And I think too, when you talk about habits, so when you're talking about what happens, say, after dinner in a household setting, some of these are conversations I don't want to have over and over again. Like,
Yeah.
if you delegate and each person has their own job that they do each time, then it becomes that habit, right? It becomes, and then as the younger one gets a little older, then they're loading the dishwasher instead of just clearing the table, whatever it is.
Right.
And the same is true. Let's talk about the workplace too, because, well, I've pretty much always worked for myself, and I'm getting better about hiring people to do things that I don't need to do myself,
Yeah.
like tech and things like that. But the delegation of a team setting, or say you're in a workplace and you're not that person's supervisor, or you're not in charge of their tasks or their responsibilities, but yet they're infringing on your time, or you're ending up doing stuff for them because they're not doing it. Like those are things that happen all the time in the workplace. So
Yeah.
that causes stress and resentment and, workplace conflict. So what is your advice for the people who are doing that? We just have a couple more minutes. So let's talk about
Yeah.
that for the workplace then.
Yeah, of course. So definitely in the workplace, right? This is definitely a thing. So going back to those boundaries, going back to that kind of stuff, right? So Emily emails me and says, "Hey, I need you to do this piece of the project. I need you to do the piece of the project." And you're going, "I did that last time. Why isn't she doing it?" So if I just go, "Okay, Emily," and take it, that's now going to become a habit for Emily. Like, "Oh, I'll just give it to Jess. I'll just give it to Jess." So if Emily hands it to me and says, "Hey, I need you to do this piece of the project," I'm going to say, "Okay, I can start it. I can do this piece of that part and I can have it done by Friday. If that doesn't work for you, you might have to find somebody else." Right. So I have to be aware of what I'm able to do without stressing myself out. Right. So having that conversation again. Now, when it comes to that, even with like, supervisors, things like that, being honest and open with what you're able to do. And I know this kind of stuff, people are like, "Well, I don't want them to think I can't do my stuff." Well, if it's out of your hat that they have given you, like this, you're this part of an accounting, you're this part of engineer, you're this part, right? If it's out of that hat, it's going, "Okay, well, this project I'm working on, do you want me to pause this project, or what project's more priority for you to get me to get that done?" Right. So there's different things, ways we could kind of go around it. So we're not working till 8 o'clock every night and stressing ourselves out.
Right. And one of the things that I've done in my business and with clients and things, or say someone says, "Oh, I'd really like to work with you. I want to do this, this, and this." And I say, "Okay, well, do this, and then reach out to me." Because if they are going to do this and this, I would do the same thing in the workplace setting. "Okay, you get to this point, then send it over to me and I'll take care of this and this." Because then you're putting something on them that they have to especially when I take on clients. If I'm going to have to, if I used to do this, I used to just give it away. People call and want to have a call with me, and I spend, an hour, end up talking about strategy, and they do or don't hire me, or it takes months. And instead I say, "Well, here's what it takes to work with me. So here's mail that off, email that off, whatever it is." And then when they come to me, for one, I know I have a good client relationship already, and two, I know they're going to do their part of the work, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to do a single thing until I know that. So that is one way we can talk about it in the workplace. But we're already out of time. It goes so fast. Thank you
Okay.
for all of these tips. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully it gave people an idea of what they can do to try to reduce their stress at work, at home, and to seek you out if they want extra help. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I had a great conversation with you.
All right, take care.